name is Sheryl, and I'm with Boulder County Parks and Open Space. I'm the Cultural History Program Coordinator. And one of the places that I work is Wagner Ranch Homestead, and it's a lot of fun. And we do old-fashioned living history demonstrations there. So we and our volunteers show people what life was like between about the 1880s and 1900 in a mountain ranch in Colorado. And so today, one of the things we're going to try is something we do sometimes at Wagner Ranch, and that is to make calling cards. Now, calling cards were kind of like your own little business card that you had, and ladies and teenage girls would use them usually during the late 1800s and early 1900s. Now, probably if you had calling cards, you probably lived in town because you need to have neighbors close by to exchange calling cards with and to go visiting to exchange your calling cards with. If you had calling cards, you probably had a little bit of money because calling cards were kind of expensive and you usually had them made professionally at a print shop. And so let me show you a couple of examples of a real calling card and a lady who that calling card belonged to. And then we'll talk about how you could make your own calling card and that kind of thing. All right, so here we go. So first of all, this lady is Amanda Wagner, and she was the county superintendent of schools in Boulder County, Colorado, many years ago. Now, to be the county superintendent of schools as a lady a long time ago in the old-fashioned days, that was something pretty special. That was a pretty special and a pretty important job. And so Amanda obviously was a super smart lady and a special lady as well. So it's pretty cool that we can learn a little bit about her nowadays. So we have two cards for Amanda as well from the old-fashioned days. We have a business card, which people still have nowadays for their jobs, and we have a calling card, which was like your own personal business card that you would just exchange with friends. So here are those cards. The top card is a business card that says she's the county superintendent of schools. The bottom card is her calling card that says she's Mrs. Charles Amanda Wagner. All right. And so, if you were going to make a calling card, you would want to do some pretty important things, some pretty special things. You want to plan it out, kind of. If you had a calling card made by a print shop, like obviously Amanda did, because hers is pretty nice, you would go to the print shop. You would get to look at what kinds of lettering you'd want, maybe what size of cards you'd want, although usually they were about a business-sized card. Maybe you could have it done in color. Maybe you could have a design around your name. There were different things depending on how much money you wanted to spend that your calling card could look like. And you'd want to know how many calling cards you'd want to have printed as well. And so you'd go there and you'd make your order, and then you go and you pick up your calling cards. Now, calling cards were kind of like putting a posting on Facebook and tagging your friend with their name, and then later on you both deciding to meet up because of that post and maybe go and get some lunch, go and play in the park, something like that. And so calling cards were a way of visiting and being social without actually even seeing each other at all at the time of the calling card. And maybe calling cards would be a little bit like if you have a Valentine's party at your school and everybody makes Valentine boxes, and then everybody goes around and puts their Valentines in everybody else's box, and then they get back and open the box and see how many Valentines they have and what they look like and who they're from. So calling cards were kind of like that. So you'd have your calling cards, and usually Saturday afternoons would be the time you'd go around and pay your calls, pay your visits with your calling cards. So you take your calling cards around to your friends' houses, and just in the entryway, you'd just go into the entryway. You wouldn't go any farther, and you wouldn't actually see your friend because your friend would be out putting their calling cards in people's houses as well. So you'd go and you'd go into the entryway of someone's house. They'd have a little tray out, and you put your calling card on their tray. Then you'd go home, and you'd see how many calling cards were on your tray at home, because everybody was going around visiting, putting their calling cards on trays in everybody's houses at the same time, and you'd see what those calling cards were like. Now, there was kind of a secret code with calling cards, too, that was kind of cool. Now, maybe you would fold down a corner on your calling card when you put it on your friend's tray. That would mean something. And there were other things that in your neighborhood you all would know meant something specific about your calling cards. And so you'd have kind of a secret code besides just getting the calling cards. And then you'd set up later on to actually see each other and to actually visit. So you can make calling cards at home. You wouldn't have to have them made in a print shop. And so that's what we're going to show today. And there are different ways you can make calling cards. Just do it with whatever you have around the house. First of all, you're going to want to practice because you're going to want to do your very best work making your calling cards. You want to do your calling cards in cursive handwriting if you can, because as you can see, calling cards were pretty fancy. And you want to have your calling cards, you could have them be business card size, but you can have them be a little bit bigger. Maybe like this, maybe like the size of a recipe card, like if your mom or your grandma write out their recipes on cards, maybe they'd have some of these around that you could use, or these especially for practice. Let's see, some examples of calling cards that our volunteers and some of our visitors made at Wagner Ranch Homestead might be helpful to get your imagination going. First of all, we have a card from Ada, and Ada did a rubber stamp on her card, so that might be something you might want to have, rubber stamps and a stamp pad. She also did some kind of lines for decoration on the edges of her card too. And she didn't put her first and last name, she just put her first name and her last initial. So very cool. Then here we have a visitor, Quentin, and his card. Now Quentin did some stars and stripes on his card, and he drew his own design. He didn't use a rubber stamp. So very cool. Here, volunteer Josie Jane Cantalupo did her card, and she had 2 rubber stamps, one on the top and one on the bottom with their name in between. And the handwriting is very nice on this card, so probably some practice was involved here. Let's see. Oh, we have a card that just has someone's initials on it in between 2 rubber stamps. Very cool, very classy. And we have here a card, and this is just a practice paper, from a visitor named Micah Forbes. Let me see if I can, I think you can see that. So Micah did something very personal on his. Notice the M in his name. It has cow horns on it. So pretty cool. He made his own design and made it really special for him. And you could do that as well. And let's see. Here's some practice work. So you can see practice is important because if you are to go to a hobby shop and get some pen and ink, it could really make a big mess. That pen and ink stains, and the pen sometimes gets more ink on it than you think. Let me show you this practice work. So a long time ago, pens didn't have ink just built into them like the ballpoint pens we have nowadays and the markers we have nowadays. You had to dip your pen in ink and get it to write. And then the pen would dry out a little bit. You'd have to dip it again. Sometimes you'd get more ink on it than you wanted and make a big smudge. And the ink stains. And so I'm going to just pretend to make a calling card for you today because I'm actually at a real museum site with old-fashioned artifacts, which were real things that people made and used many years ago. So I don't want to make a mess. So we're going to pretend. So get your mind movie going and we'll pretend. And you can actually do this at home, but you could even just do it with a pencil, with a pen, with markers, with a fountain pen, just kind of whatever you might have around or might be able to get easily at a craft store. So first of all, you're going to want to practice. You're going to do your very best handwriting, preferably your first and your last name, and in cursive handwriting. Now, at the time when Amanda was making her calling cards, and the Walkers were living at Wagner Ranch, the kind of handwriting that was taught in the schools was the Palmer method. So you might want to look online and find the Palmer method and find examples of that cursive handwriting of the alphabet, and take a look at that and see if you can try to practice that and make your calling cards with the kind of handwriting those people would have used many years ago. So first of all, you're going to want a piece of paper or maybe even just one of these cards to do some practice work on. To practice your very best handwriting, decide what kind of design you want. Maybe you will want a rubber stamp with an ink pad, and so here's our stamp. But you probably want to put the stamp on first so you know how big or small you need to make your name and plan for that even in your practice. So with your practice, you have paper or a card, you'll have a pencil, and you'll just practice writing your name over and over in cursive in your very best handwriting until you think you have it exactly how you want it for your calling card. Then, if you have one, you'll want to get a little business size card, a blank one, and set it down real carefully. Get your stamp out if you want to put a stamp on, and your ink pad, put that on it. Maybe let it dry for a little bit so you don't smudge it with your hand when you're writing, and then write your first and last name in that very best cursive handwriting on your card. And if you're going to use pen and ink, which you might want to do, so it's really the old-fashioned way, or even a feather quill pen if you can come up with one of those, you want to get your ink, and look at this ink bottle. It's got ink all over it, so it shows that it's messy, huh? You want to get your pen, and this pen is, the old-fashioned kind of pen that the Walkers and people like that used many years ago. So it's a little different from our pens now. I'll hold it up so you can see a little bit. So that metal part on the end, that's the nib. And there are different thicknesses of nibs. You can see this one's kind of thick, but you could get thin ones, you could get different ones for different styles of handwriting you might want to do. You have a handle and it's wooden, And these nibs come out. And so that's how you can adjust different styles of handwriting. We have a pretty thick one in this one right now. So if I were going to make my calling card, I would have done my rubber stamp or a design already if I was going to do that. So I knew how big or small I needed to make my name. And then I'd get my bottle of ink, and I would get my pen, and I would just barely, I'd take the lid off the ink, of course. We're not going to today. And I would just barely dip the pen in the ink, just so the tip of the pen gets in the ink. Not too much more, and not so it gets way up here all over my fingers. And then I would use it, and I would just write with it, and write my first and last name in cursive in my very best handwriting. And you might want to let your calling card dry for a little while, because sometimes, like I said, that ink can kind of bunch up and you know, kind of make a mess. If you're using pen and ink, you probably want to have a jar with some water in it. You'll probably want to have a cloth to wipe up any spills, and the water to wet down any spills in case anything spills on you, because the ink will stain your clothes or stain your furniture and stuff like that. So you want to be careful, and you want to get your parents involved so they kind of know what you're doing. But, you know, make a couple calling cards. Make a whole bunch. Maybe make one for your friend or for your family member. And I bet your dog needs a calling card, right? And certainly the cat needs a calling card, right? And so just something fun to try out, like they did in the old-fashioned days. And with just whatever you might have around the house to do some writing and things like that, and do some practice. So thank you all very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.